ahead and get started. Just so everyone knows, this first part of the workshop is going to be recorded so that people who could make it can rewatch this PowerPoint portion, but we will have a part that will not be recorded where we go into breakout rooms, give more specific advice. So if you have any more personal questions, you can save them for the breakout rooms. And the breakout rooms will divide based on whether or not you're applying this cycle, and also based on whether or not you are either a senior or have already graduated, or if you are not yet a senior, because you'll have different needs based on what year you are. So just so you know, this is recorded, but the whole thing won't be recorded. So you will have a chance to ask questions that you may not want to have on YouTube. And you will get access to this link. So if there's anything you want to rewatch or anything like that, you'll be able to see this portion of the workshop. So we're going to introduce ourselves really quick so you know who you're getting advice from. I think that might be nice. So I'm Katrina. I am a rising 5th year grad student, and I study yeast genetics in Kathy Friedman's lab.
Okay. Hi guys, I'm Tara. I am a rising 2nd year grad student. I do computational genetics research in a co-mentorship between Alex Bick's lab and Leah Davis.
Hi, I'm Remy. Sorry, I don't know if I froze there. I'm Remy. I'm a rising 3rd year. I'm also in Kathy Friedman's lab with Katrina, studying DNA repair with yeast.
Hi, I'm Mariana. I am also a rising 3rd year. I'm in Todd Graham's lab, and where I study, and my lab studies, membrane trafficking and how it relates to disease.
Hi, I'm Melanie. I'm also a rising 3rd year. I'm in Vivian Gamma's lab, and I study neurodevelopment.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jordan. I also am a rising 3rd year. I study mosquito immunology in Julian Hillier's lab.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lantana. I'm a rising 2nd year in Malik Patel's lab, where I study mitochondria and mitochondrial DNA.
Hi, guys. Super kudos to you for being here. That shows your dedication to your path. I really respect you guys. My name is Beth Bowman. I actually just got a new title. I'm the Associate Director of Trainee Support, but I have been involved with admissions and recruiting for several years here at Vanderbilt. So I'm excited to see you guys. Thanks for being here.
Okay, so that's who we are. We're going to go ahead and get started with our PowerPoint. So just a quick outline for what this workshop is going to be in this talk. We're going to talk about different types of programs, getting your applications ready, different myths, and then an application timeline. So y'all can kind of see the things that you need to start doing in order to apply. And then we're going to go into breakout rooms and talk about how to pick where to apply or how to find labs, things like that, depending on what step you are in. But after the timeline, we'll actually go into breakout rooms. And then just an important thing, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat, and Remy, you will see many pictures of during this talk. We'll answer them or open it to those of us who are giving this PowerPoint. And then we will try and copy and paste these questions into a Word document and their answers so that you have them later. But then since this is recorded, you could also go back and see some of the different answers to questions that we talk about out loud to everyone. Okay, so getting started, just types of program. What is it? Sorry, my computer is, okay, there we go. Types of programs. We're gonna talk about direct admit programs versus umbrella programs. So direct admit programs are department specific. So when you enter into a direct program, your choices for labs are limited to that department. And it's a good option for people who are already sure what they want to study and know exactly what like their path is going to be. Umbrella programs contain multiple departments. So your choices for labs aren't as limited to a specific department. And it's a really good choice for people who want to explore different fields and different options. Okay, so rotations are like speed dating for labs. Most programs do 3 to 4 rotations where you spend about 8 weeks in a lab to see what it's like. And at the end of your last rotation, you join one of the labs that you've tried out. But not all schools do rotations. Some schools you will just join a lab directly when you enter. And for those schools, it's a good idea to reach out to PIs, which are just like primary investigators or the boss of the lab while you are applying. And so if you would like to try out labs before you go into one or actually join a lab, then you want to look for programs that have rotations. Does anyone have any questions about this section? Okay, so then we'll just go to the next section. Thank you.
Great. So I'm going to be introducing CVs and talking about resumes a little bit here. So up to this point, you might be most familiar with resumes. They're probably what you've used to apply for summer jobs, summer internships, things like that. So you already know that they're a quick one-page summary of a person's accomplishments, and you make them really specifically for each thing that you apply for that requires a resume. And for some people, the first time they encounter a CV or a curriculum vitae is when they're applying for grad school. So this is a little different from a resume, but it's accomplishing the same thing. So it's a multi-page document that showcases your entire academic career. So it's more likely that this is going to be the document that a grad school requests from you. Sometimes they'll say resume or CV, but to me, that kind of means give them your CV because it's more beneficial because it's more comprehensive. So it's going to have more things listed on it. And so that's going to be what the school wants to see. And so you want to put like front and forward the things that you really want to showcase, which are your education. So that usually goes to the top where you went to school. And then your research. Since grad schools are looking to take you in as a researcher, you want to show them that you can do research and you have research experience. So that you want to make up the bulk of your CV. But there's other things that make you a really awesome, well-rounded human that the grad school wants to recruit. And those include your teaching experiences, the ways you've shared your research with others, so publications, conferences, and the ways you've been recognized within your academic community, such as awards, and how you interact with your community, so things like leadership. And you want this all to be easy to read. You have another place to write paragraphs and paragraphs of information, and that's your personal statement, but that's not what this is. You want this to be a skimmable document. So easy to read, lots of kind of quick sentences, maybe bullet points where you utilize headers, bold and underlined, and negative space so that it can all be read well. And you want to organize it in a logical order. Normally we do this chronologically where we put newest things at the top and then oldest things. So you would put maybe starting with your bachelor's and when you're going to finish it, if that's your case. And then after that, your research. So you do what research you're doing now, but if you worked on a project 2 years ago, that would come after. And so the whole thing is kind of organized like that in your subsections. But I wanted to say again that research should be forward because that is the thing you really want to highlight within your CV because that's what grad schools are going to be really interested in seeing. And you want to be aware of grammar always in all parts of your application. So just going to throw that out there. So grammar again, so make sure to proofread. My tip that I find really helpful is if you maybe print your document out and then read it out loud to yourself, because that's a really great way of finding little things that you wouldn't pick up on if you necessarily read your document in a Word file, where your brain kind of fills in what you think should be there. And also have friends and mentors read your CV, because they can see things that sometimes you can't see when you've looked at the document for too long. And you want to really highlight your achievements that are relevant to grad school and include lots of things in your academic history, but make sure that the less significant things are towards the end. So research first, and then maybe some teaching, publications, conferences, and then leadership at the end. And so here we have a quick example of a resume. And so, like I said, this is something you've probably been working with up until now. So you have education, a little bit of research experience, and teaching and mentorship and work experience. So these are the same types of things that you would include on a CV, but perhaps this person left out some things so that everything could be squished onto one page. And so it's much more tailored and not necessarily as comprehensive. And so on the next page, we can see an example of a CV. And here, this has gone over onto 2 pages, which someone maybe once told you was like a no-no for a resume. But a CV grows as you go through your academic career. And so applying out of undergrad, maybe 1 to 3 pages is appropriate, depending on your experiences. Here we have a 2-page one, which is awesome. And so we see it lists out every single poster presentation this student has given. So that shows all the things they've been a part of. But each one is like only a line. So we can skim this really fast and get a sense of the types of research the student's been a part of and what activities they're in. And it's organized with education and research first, and then all the other cool things that help make you a strong applicant come in a little bit later. Right. And so I know that's kind of a lot about CVs, but they are a really great way of incorporating all the things you've done. So they're an important part of your research. Or of your application. So we're happy to answer any questions you have about CVs and CVs versus resumes.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, awesome.
So I was just wondering, as you mentioned, as you move forward in your research career, there's a lot of experiences you accumulate. What if, as you move forward in your career, you realize that a few of the experiences that you've had are not as significant as the ones that you're currently having, or like you just realize that something, and so is it okay to not mention those experiences and mention a few other ones that you think are more important?
Yeah, so I think what you're kind of getting at is perhaps that like challenge of wanting to make central the things that are most important, but still not leave out all the things you've done. And so for individual examples, I might suggest talking to a mentor you have to see if they think it's worth keeping. But for the most part, you want to keep all of your accomplishments because they're all valuable, and just make sure you're centering the ones that are most important.
I'm going to build off that, Lantana. So keep all, at least have one running document that has all of your experiences on it. But note that one running document or working document, your working resume, your working CV, does not have to be the same CV that you use for all your applications of all of the things that you apply for. So, but make sure that you have a document somewhere that has everything on it. And then depending on what you are applying for, whether it be a job, like a position somewhere, for graduate school, for things like that, you may choose to highlight certain things from that working document and bring those things to like the forefront or the top of certain lists in a specific CV or resume that you're submitting. So just keep that in mind.
Cool. So I'm going to take over the next part. And so another portion of the graduate school application is potentially this graduate record examination, or the GRE. And so the GRE is a standardized test that pretty much covers all subjects: English, math, etc., writing. It's very similar to like an ACT or an SAT that you've used in order to get into undergrad. However, this is more for like graduate programs. And specifically in biomedical research PhD programs, they're actually putting less emphasis on the GRE and are often taking into account other experiences, such as like research experiences that you'll see on the resume and letters of recommendation, which we'll talk about in just a second. And so when you kind of like formulated your whole like list of schools that you want to apply to, you should definitely check to see if they require a GRE. Oftentimes, like nowadays, they're optional. And when they mean optional, it's like really optional. Like I all of the schools that I applied to, I didn't have a GRE requirement at all. So I didn't even take. However, if you do apply to a school that does require the GRE, so essentially what goes, you go to like a testing station and you go and take the exam, and at the end it'll allow you to send 4 free scores to 4 different schools, and then after that it's like $27 in order to send it to other schools that are more than 4. And additionally, this is a standardized test, and oftentimes you'll have some sort of prep work that needs to be done. So you should probably get familiarized with what exactly is going on in these exams. And so you can find a lot of online resources, as well as like free preparation courses that are online, or even like at your undergraduate library, or maybe you knew someone who took the exam who doesn't need their like supplies anymore, and you can like grab them from them so you can start studying for that. Another portion of the graduate school application, which is really, really important, is this letters of recommendation. And so letters of recommendations are, as you would expect, are just letters written by former mentors, research faculty, your instructors, or perhaps someone you work with on a daily basis that is able to talk about your ethics, your worth ethics. And so most programs will require at minimum 3 letters of recommendation, and some of them will be like, you can do like 3 to 5. And so whatever you feel most comfortable submitting. And so the people that are writing these recommendations, especially those that were like former research mentors, are going to talk about your scientific achievements. So how well you were able to work in lab, were you able to do any like conference presentations, were you a good student, those types of things. Some small like red flag things are, if you, let's say I had a research experience my freshman year of undergrad, and it didn't go very well. I didn't get along with my research mentor. And so I know that she might not write me a letter of recommendation that's good. It's not going to be like, she might say something negative towards my worth ethic or something. And so I might not include her as a person who is going to write one of my letters of rec. But when a graduate school admissions administrator is looking at these letters of recommendation saying, hey, Mariana did this research experience freshman year, but there's no letter of recommendation. So now why is that? So that's something you should probably address during your personal statement, which we'll talk about next. And so it kind of gives you a reason as to why you're missing this type of recommendation, because recommendations from like research mentors is like one of the things that administrators are going to be looking at. And then super, super, super important is that you have to give your writer like enough time to actually write the letter. So for example, I would give them at minimum like 1 month ahead of time, be like, hey, I would like you to write a letter of recommendation. And then some things that they can ask from you are like a CV or your personal statement or the list of schools that you're applying to. So you might want to like have that kind of formulated in your head ahead of time, and then go ahead and ask who you would like to have as a person who writes your letter of recommendation. And so if you're like towards the beginning of your undergrad degree, you can start to think about who you would like to have as a letter recommender, person to write your letters of recommendation. So maybe you can start like going to specific class faculty that teach your class that you perhaps like, and have conversations with them about research experiences that you could have, or you could maybe think about doing like a research opportunity, whether it's like during the school year or during the summer, and then you can find people who would write letters of recommendation for you. And then kind of as like a senior, hopefully you've done some experiences, you'll have to think back, and maybe one thing you can do even now is just reach back and be like, hey, I took your class junior year to a faculty, and be like, I really enjoyed this. Do you want to have could we have a conversation about whatever subject? So you can start building these types of bonds between you and your faculty, or you and a previous professor, so that they'll have something to write about, because it's kind of hard if you go to your intro organic chemistry class who the teacher taught 500 students in one lecture, and they're going to pick out one person, which is you, and try to write something personal about you. They're not going to write. It's going to be super generic, and it's going to be very obvious to someone reading those types of letters that they're like generic. And so you really need to get these from someone who knows you personally, and you've had like more than like a one-time 10-minute conversation with. So it's like that type of person. Next slide. Okay, cool. So I think the last section, the last kind of major section of the graduate school application is these personal statements. And so these are documents, generally 1 to 2 pages, but that'll be like specified on each application. And essentially you want to be able to tell your story. Why are you going to grad school? Why do you want to pursue a PhD? Why do you want to pursue a master's degree? And you should be able to incorporate your experiences as a whole, and how each research experience you did is able to like kind of make you think about research a different way. This made you decide to do research for the first time. And it doesn't even have to be a research experience. Maybe you had like a curiosity when you were 5 of like butterfly evolution, and been like, so that could be like your kind of intro story, and be like, oh, this is a cool thing. So definitely the biggest thing that you kind of want to highlight is research experiences. So I don't know how many times we're going to say this during this workshop, but research experiences are very, very important. And this section allows you to demonstrate how you're able to communicate your research to another person. And so, yes. And then as I mentioned before, this statement is also used to address any kind of challenges that you've had. So maybe, as I mentioned, you didn't have a recommendation from a specific mentor. So that could be something you address. Or if you, let's say your junior year, you got an accident, and then didn't realize you were really sick or something, and and your grades started going sad. It started getting sad, yeah. So you would have to go in and be like, oh, this semester I had an unfortunate health incident, so I wasn't doing too well in my classes, those kind of things. And then super, super, super important is you need to get feedback on these documents from other people, especially people, if you're including a specific research experience, the people that were helping you during those experiences, because they'll be able to tell whether or not the way you're communicating the research is like good enough to be understood by a different person. And so that being said, we also have a personal statement writing workshop in last week of September that you guys can come in either with a already kind of rough draft personal statement, hopefully, or just coming in to bounce ideas and like just listen to what we have to say about the document. Any questions?
We did have one question in the chat that maybe one or two panelists could kind of speak to about balancing, like how if you have like a variety of different research experiences, and sure, you mentioned them on your CV, but you're not going to be describing the projects in detail. Did any of you have like research experiences that you didn't describe in detail in your personal statement?
I can kind of speak to this. So I had like 3 research experiences, and I only talked about 2 of them in my research statement. And the way because you don't get a ton of space, so I personally wouldn't recommend talking about more than 2 unless you're like the most concise person in the universe. But the way I prioritized them was just which ones were most impactful in making me decide I wanted to do science, and B, that I had the most like control over, so I could actually talk about what I did in the project and how much I contributed to it beyond like just following the instructions of someone else. So if you have many research experiences, just for your list them all in your CV, but for your personal statement, prioritize the ones where you can really talk about like, this is what I did for this project, this is how I contributed to it intellectually, and like those projects where you really kind of took the lead, and also the projects where you were like, this is when I decided I wanted to be a scientist. Hopefully that makes sense.
Just to make sure that's super clear, essentially the 2 major points that you kind of want to have included in a personal statement that may come for your research experiences is like why you want to do graduate school. First one, so maybe that's a research experience. And the second one is to help show the person reading the statement that you had some experience, you understand what research is and how it's conducted, and you're able to communicate this effectively. So those are the 2 major things. So if you literally have just one research experience that does both of that, you could just do that. So 1 out of like say 3 that does it best, sure, that's fine.
Another thing to add to that, so, you know, we're talking about personal statements and research statements. Some applications have things divided where you talk about like your most impactful research experience, or they have like small little boxes for descriptors of your research experiences, and then in another area it asks you to go into more depth on one of them. So it'll depend a little bit on the application if it wants you to specifically feature a single research experience as the most impactful experience, as opposed to just describing all of them that you may have.
Okay.
Okay, so here's just kind of some like myths or things you might have heard about grad school that we kind of want to discuss. So the first thing is I will give a strong recommendation to steer clear of grad cafe at all costs, because when you're already really stressed out about like applying and you're not sure if you're going to hear back about interviews or all of that stuff, it can be really, really stressful to like troll the forums of all the people who are talking about if they got interviews or what their stats were or like anything like that. Because most of the time it's actually not super useful, because most interviews are kind of released on a very rolling basis. So just because someone else got an interview doesn't mean you won't get an interview. And also you have no idea if these people are even real, or like if they're leaving out important gaps in their, you know, they might say they have like a perfect GPA and they cured cancer and they like started 3 businesses, but like you don't know anything behind the scenes. So it's really difficult to like compare yourself, and it can get really stressful, especially when you're already stressed out. So from personal experience, I really recommend staying away from that, because it's not super helpful anyway. And schools will tell you like the timeline of when they release, you know, the general timeline of when they release interview notifications, and it's not going to change whether you get accepted or not. So don't do it. Second thing is that it's not the same as undergrad. So when you're applying to grad school, don't just look for schools that are really prestigious in undergrad and just apply to like the top however many of those, because that's a really bad way to sort of get yourself in a situation where you might get accepted to a great school, but there's no one there that you want to do research with. So in grad school, the most important thing is finding a PI that you want to work with. And so that should be your number one priority. So you should be looking for schools that maybe have a really great department and what you're interested in studying, or have people who are making big impacts in the field that you're interested in. And that should be like the number one biggest priority. Especially because, you know, like it says on here, prestigious undergraduate institutions are not necessarily great at research and great at grad school. So definitely don't just look at that. And then of course, like undergrad, but even more in grad school, there's so many other factors that are super important. So things like, where is the location and how much is the stipend? And because you get paid to go to grad school. So if your stipend is too low to live in the city that the school is in, like that's something you want to know. So like a lot of other factors are super important, and we're going to talk about them later in the breakout rooms. But just, yeah, don't just look at rankings. That's a terrible way to do that. The next thing is, don't be afraid or like think it's going to hurt your application to take a gap year or a couple of years or work for a little bit before you apply. I would definitely say, like, at least in my class, I would say probably about half, if not more, of us didn't come straight from undergrad. And it's definitely super normal and super expected, especially because grad school is like a huge commitment. And so you want to know that it's what you want to do. And maybe you want to like get some more experience first, or figure out if you actually are into research or what kind of research you're into. So it's totally okay to do that, and it can actually strengthen your application. So if that's something that you're interested in, like, don't be afraid to do that if that sounds like the best option for you. Any questions? Okay, and then, yeah, just some miscellaneous things. So first, you do need to always have your transcripts to send with your application. So it's important to sort of think about this when you're applying, because you don't want like your transcript being late to be like the thing that keeps them from reading your application. And so it's a really great idea to make sure that you know how to get a transcript from your institution and how to send it. And some schools have fees to do that. So you also want to know that if in your budgeting and things like that. And so any institution you attended for college, so even for things like a summer school credit or anything like that, you want to include that. And yeah, make sure they're not encrypted. Make sure, like, if some schools require official transcripts and other people are like don't need official and only need unofficial. So know that, because you might be able to get an unofficial one for free and have to pay for an official one. So that's a good thing to know. And just make sure you're on top of that and you request them early enough so that there's enough time to send them to the various schools, and make sure all the schools are getting them. Because that's a really like dumb thing to mess up and end up like hurting your application. Yes, and really, really important, because applying to grad school can be really expensive, especially if you're applying to schools that have some schools have like way higher application fees, or they don't have fee waivers for, you know, previous research. And so definitely check for fee waivers. Some schools are free to apply to, so not every school has a fee. So that's also good to know, but definitely check and see if you can get a fee waiver, especially if you're particularly worried about the cost of applying to grad school. And yeah, ask early, because sometimes there's like a deadline to get a fee waiver. And it's also just good to know. But yeah, definitely try if you're interested, because it can't hurt and it can save you a lot of money, and because all of these things can really add up. And we want, you know, everyone should be able to apply. So definitely try it out. Okay, and last but not least is GPA. super, super important, but definitely not something that will absolutely break you if you don't have the best GPA. And this was something I was stressed out about. And I just want to tell you from experience, I'm in grad school. So don't get super stressed out about it. It's definitely something that you can talk about in your personal statement, especially if you had like a semester where you had a rough time, or even if like you just really struggled in your coursework, but you excelled in your research, like that's more important. And so you can talk about that. And this could be one of the reasons, I think we were talking about the GRE earlier. So if you're really like, if you have gaps in your GPA, you can always take the GRE to sort of supplement and show that like you can do well. And so that can be a great way to sort of supplement it. But at the end of the day, your GPA is your GPA and you can't change it. So the best thing that you can do is to sort of highlight your strengths and address weaknesses if you have them, but also just, again, focus on research. That's the most important thing. And it definitely will not absolutely break your entire grad school application.
Okay, so just really quickly, we're going to go through like an application timeline so you can kind of see what you need to start thinking about and when deadlines are going to be. So most applications are due around December 1st and December 15th. Interviews are from January to March. So go look at the schools you're interested in and see what their different deadlines are so you can generate a timeline specific for your applications. Sometimes schools will be weird and have earlier deadlines. So if there's a school you're interested in that's earlier, then you know to prioritize that school. So things you should be doing now is identifying schools and programs you want to apply to, and then also ask if you can use someone as a letter writer. Like we said earlier, you want to give letter writers as much time as possible since they likely will have a lot of letters to write. And then you also want to prepare your personal statements and research statements. And this is pretty important. You want to flip through applications to look for all the questions you may have to answer. Some applications you'll think you just have to like have your personal statement and research statement, and then you'll click through, and at the end there'll be like 5 other questions you have to answer about like what the word science means to you. And so you just want to make sure early on you kind of know what you're getting into, and you're not blindsided trying to submit your application and then realize you have more things you have to write. And then, like Tara was saying earlier, you want to ask about fee waivers. So with that, questions before we have to go into the breakout room?
Yeah, real quick, could everyone just on the panel just say like how many schools they applied to? I'll start. I just want to put this out there. I started off in like August with like a list of 10 schools that I wanted to apply to. And then I only ended up applying to 6 of them because I said, this is really tiring and I don't want to do this. And then I interviewed at 3 and I was like, oh my God, this is so exhausting. I don't want to interview at anymore. So applications are very time consuming and exhausting. So just keep that in mind when you're planning.
Yeah, I applied to 7 different schools.
I applied to 10 schools.
I was gonna say, I applied to 8 schools, or 7 schools with 8 programs. So sometimes schools have like how we talked about with direct admit programs versus umbrella programs. So you might have a specific school that you're interested in that has direct programs, which might lead you to apply to multiple programs at a single school if your research interests overlap multiple programs.
I applied to, I think, 11 schools. I interviewed at 6, and I think I had fee waivers for 9 of those schools when I applied.
I applied to 3 for my master's and really knew what I wanted to do for my PhD and applied to just 1.
So stressful to me. I applied to 8. I also interviewed at all 8 of them, And you can get fee waivers also, because I got fee waivers for all of those. So just heads up, put it out there.
Also, we're all sharing like interview statistics too. Note that every school that you apply to, you could get an offer to interview there. When it comes to the spring, you only have so many weeks that you actually can go to an interview. So like, it's not really helpful to apply to like over 10 or 15 schools or whatever, like your medical student friends, because you can't feasibly even visit that many schools. So.
And some schools are really mean and they only have like 1 or 2 weekends. And they'll be like, if you can't make the interview, you can't come. And so they're really mean like that. And you're just like, okay, I'll just.
Along those lines, if you get an interview and you're not interested, it's okay to cancel. Even if you had scheduled it and said yes, please don't do it days before. Please do it a few weeks before. But that is totally fine. No offense taken. If you're really not interested, don't waste your time. Don't waste their time.
Okay. Was that I think that was everyone. I don't know. I'm really bad at counting.
I have a question.
Oh yes. What's your question?
Sorry. So for people who interviewed to more than 5 schools, do you pay for the travel, or does the school pay for the travel?
You don't have to pay for any of it. The school pay for
Okay.
everything. And there might be an initial cost that you get charged and they do a reimbursement, but
Okay.
your travel will be paid for, all your meals will be paid for, where you're staying will be covered. So you don't have to worry about that at all.
Yeah, you don't have
Thank
to
you.
pay in money, but you remember your time is also valuable and it's a lot of time. And it's exhausting to go interview places. So yes, like everything is paid for, but keep in mind, like if you're still in undergrad, you're gonna have to be taking time from your classes. A lot of them, like you'll be missing like a Thursday or a Friday or sometimes even a Monday. So like you do not need to interview everywhere you get interviews if you have a lot, because it is very tiring.
Yeah,
and your time is valuable.
Approval for like time off or time away. Like if you're working, these days might be days that you have to take like vacation for, things like that. And your interviews will last like Thursday through Sunday. So it's like a 4-day thing that you typically always have to have time off for. Or if you're in, undergrad, I mean, I interviewed while I was in undergrad and I missed 7 Thursday, Fridays. So it's tough.
Yeah. Okay. I want to make sure we have plenty of time for the breakout rooms, but are there any more questions for this section? And keep in mind, you can also ask questions in the breakout rooms if you would like.
I want to say one more thing really quickly about interviews. There'll be a whole workshop on this, so we don't need to spend more time on it. I think there will be a lot of virtual interviews this year still, because especially with the Delta variant, so that changes some of the calculations, but it still wears you out just the same. So don't let the virtual thing keep you feeling like you have to interview everywhere, because Zoom is exhausting. We all know that now.
Thank you, Beth, for plugging the interview workshop, which we'll be doing.
Register now for our next workshop on September 29th about the personal statement. We can't wait to see you there.